Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I was scraping the last bit of baked cheese from the casserole pan when she leaned against the doorway like a critic about to review a show she never intended to enjoy. I'm Daniel Hayes, 40, a project manager in Austin, Texas, and this is where the evening turned. The house smelled like rosemary and butter. The ceiling fan hummed. Her phone screen lit her face in a cold square. She didn't look up when she delivered the line that finished what the past few months had already started. "You're replaceable, remember that." I rinsed the pan, set it to dry, and put the towel back on its hook. There are moments when a man's impulse is to argue, and then there are moments when the truth is so clear you can only stand in it. No raised voice. Just a quiet answer that felt like laying down a heavy bag I didn't notice I'd been carrying. "I will." Funny what lands and what doesn't. You'd think a sentence like that would come with a tremor in the hands or a lurch in the stomach. Instead, everything sharpened. The tick of the oven cooling, the faint traffic on South Lamar, the tiny chip on the lip of her favorite wine glass. She blinked once, surprised the hook didn't catch. Then the smirk returned, practiced and bored, and she drifted past me to the table, angling her phone so the light faced down. The point had never been a conversation. It was a declaration. If you asked me how we got here, I could circle a dozen small coordinates on the map. Passwords that changed overnight. The way her phone started living face down, screen time ballooning like a second job. Weekends that used to be hours, walking the trail, coffee at the little shop by Zilker, turned into plans with the girls, announced after she was already out the door. Jokes in front of other people that landed just a little too sharp. Nothing big enough for a headline. Enough to make you feel like a piece of furniture she kept forgetting to dust. She used to ask about my sites, wanted to see the drawings, listen when I explained why a sequencing change saved the client 6 figures. Lately, any mention of work earned a shrug, or that smile people use when they don't want to be caught rolling their eyes. My job made our mortgage easy, stacked the emergency fund, covered her classes and retreats. But stability is invisible when it's doing its job. A month earlier, we were at a friend's birthday, string lights in a backyard, plastic cups sweating in the heat. She stood with a cluster of newly single acquaintances, nodding along as they cataloged their ex's failures. I joined the circle and offered to grab her a drink. She stared past me and said she'd manage, then laughed at something I didn't hear. It wasn't the first time I understood a message without the words. On the drive home, she scrolled while the city moved by in neon and tail lights. The silence that night wasn't heavy. It was hollow. I could see the outline of what was missing. After the line at dinner, she ate with the appetite of someone who believes the world is waiting for her. I finished my portion and cleared the plates, the way you do when you refuse to give the moment extra drama. She wandered to the couch and the blue light found her face again. A reel of someone else's life rolled on her screen. Beaches, brunches, a caption about choosing yourself. I didn't ask for a translation. We both spoke fluent context by now. Here's what I remember most about the rest of that night. The sound of the dishwasher starting. The metallic click of the lock when I stepped outside. The air had cooled just enough to make the street feel like a different city. Somewhere a neighbor's dog was negotiating with the night. I walked to the end of the block, touched the stop sign, and turned back. I wasn't trying to clear my head. It was already clear. My feet needed to learn what my mind had decided. Back inside, she glanced up, realized I wasn't going to resume the old routine. Ask for explanation, offer compromise, make a plan to appease a moving target, and dropped her eyes to the glow again. I cleaned the counters, put away the leftover wine, switched off the lamp by the window we used to sit near on thunderstorms, counting between lightning and thunder like kids. When I passed behind the couch, she shifted slightly away, as if respectful of her own narrative about distance. I lay in bed with my hands behind my head and watched the slice of streetlight move along the ceiling. People talk about heartbreak like a jagged thing. Sometimes it's a calibration. Everything clicks into the track it's been inching toward. We weren't fighting. We weren't even miscommunicating. She'd finally sent the message without the emojis, and I'd received it without protest. There's a dignity in taking people at their word, even when the word is a knife. Morning came with the same ordinary rituals. Coffee, shower, the mental checklist of a man who has crews waiting on his call. She stood at the island fixing a yogurt, scrolling with her free hand. "You're replaceable." hung in the air like a new paint smell, faint but impossible to ignore. I packed my laptop, checked my calendar, and felt a new line appear inside me. At the sight, rebar and sunlight, the hot chatter of productivity filled the space where the previous month's worry had lived. I marked issues on the floor plan, made a call about delivery conflicts, solved a problem in 10 minutes that would have cost us 2 days if we waited. Purpose doesn't ask permission. When a foreman joked about my Sunday face, on a Tuesday, I laughed. On lunch break, I opened notes and started a list. What is mine, what is shared, what I've allowed to drift into fog because I hoped fog would turn back into shoreline. Mortgage. Accounts. The spare key she'd lent a friend without mentioning it. The streaming services, the gym membership, the emergency contacts that still listed her as primary. I changed one field. My brother, first call. A small thing, almost nothing. I didn't text her. The urge to write long paragraphs explaining how something felt has a way of disappearing when you stand in the feeling instead. I drank my water, wiped my hands, and walked the second half of the site. The world kept moving. That was the comfort in it. That evening she came home later than usual and narrated a story about a coworker's drama with the bright, performative energy of someone auditioning for a different audience. I listened like a man who has listened well and finally set the receiver down. When the pause arrived where I used to insert reassurance, I let the pause be a pause. Her eyes flicked to mine, confused that the old script wasn't waiting. In bed, she scrolled for a while, then turned her back and pulled the covers with a practiced tug. I stared at the ceiling again and considered the simple geometry of respect. You don't draw it from someone by asking. You either live where it is, or you leave where it isn't. Her sentence had clarified my map. My answer, 2 words, had been the first step. I fell asleep faster than I had in weeks. The house breathed. The fan traced its lazy circle. Somewhere a sprinkler clicked to life, keeping the grass honest. I didn't dream about confrontation or proof. I dreamed about a door I had left open too long, and the clean sound it made when I finally closed it. The next morning, she was up early in a new set of leggings and a cropped sweatshirt, hair slicked into the kind of ponytail that says the gym is a stage. She left before I finished my coffee and came back after I'd already knocked out 2 site calls. No glance, just a phone deposited face down on the island and a running commentary about a killer class and important plans later. The sentence from last night followed her like perfume. You're replaceable. She didn't repeat it out loud. That week became a study in small cuts. She started announcing plans, not asking. Drinks with the girls, as she was already slipping on heels. Dinner with coworkers, while I was plating food I'd made for 2. Photos appeared on her feed. Angles, lights, captions about freedom, tagged at places we used to try together for the first time. When I looked at the receipts later, they stacked like playing cards in the banking app. At a friend's rooftop, she found a new gear for public dismissals. I was telling a harmless story about a scheduling fix that saved a client 2 weeks when she let out that polite loud laugh people use when they want a circle to pivot. Daniel loves his spreadsheets, she said, pinching 2 fingers together. You should see the way he lights up about concrete. They laughed because she wanted them to. I smiled because I understood the assignment. No counterpunch, just a mental note. The private jokes had gone public. At home, she narrated her world with a tone you use for a roommate whose lease is almost up. She'd hop into the shower at 10 p.m., leave damp footprints on the mat, and whisper laugh with the bathroom door half closed while a man's voice rose and fell through the steam. When she caught me looking, she pointed at the mirror and said, "Relax, it's a podcast." I wiped up the water and went to bed. I asked once, just the one question a man gets to ask if he still respects himself. Is there someone else? She didn't bother with words, just that thin smile, the kind that carries a shrug and a dare. I nodded. Message received. People tell you smirks are nothing. They're wrong. A smirk is a decision with a face. She started testing distance like it was a sport. A dress that didn't exist in our closet last month. A new lock screen, new lock code, new rule that her phone belonged under her pillow at night. A Saturday morning that used to be ours turned into a full itinerary she could never fully explain. Errands that included hair, nails, a late lunch, a late drink. She returned with the bright exhaustion of a person who wants you to ask so she can punish you for asking. When we were with her friends, they fed her lines like they were passing appetizers. You still young, girl. Don't settle. Men step up when they're scared to lose you. They said these things while looking at me the way you look at a sturdy chair. Useful until you want something with more color. She soaked it up, nodded as if she'd discovered a secret we'd been hiding from her. It's easy to feel chosen when the jury is your peers and the verdict costs them nothing. There were practical escalations, too. She lost the spare key I kept for service calls. She rescheduled our dentist appointment without telling me, then acted surprised I missed it. She moved her car charger to her purse and swore she'd never seen it. Each thing, alone, is petty. Together, they told a story about territory. I let the story tell itself. At a coworker's birthday, she found the loudest corner and worked it. There was a guy from her department, all cologne and practiced empathy, who kept leaning in like he was trying to hear her heartbeat. I watched the body language, her hand on his sleeve longer than needed, his chin tilt, the triangle of attention that excludes the husband by posture alone. I walked over, said hello, shook his hand, and offered her a water. She smiled through me. No thanks. We're fine. The we wasn't an accident. I finished my club soda and left early. On the ride home, she texted me from the passenger seat of someone else's car a photo of the skyline. She captioned it, "Love this city." I texted back, "Me too." Then I put my phone away. She started repeating the thesis in new packaging. Any man would treat me better. You're lucky I'm still here. I have options, Daniel. I cleared my plates after dinner, wiped the counter, and went for a walk around the block. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's a receipt. Her mother called one evening, all sugar and grenades. "We're worried you've become rigid, dear." I said we were fine, thanked her for the concern, and changed the subject to the weather back in Waco. When I hung up, I smiled because I recognized the playbook. The committee had convened. You don't out-argue committees. You outlast them. Inside me, something moved from feeling to framework. I shifted small systems to match the new facts. I began leaving early and coming home a shade later. I stopped announcing my schedule. I stopped rescuing plans she forgot. When she texted, "Pick up flowers for my friend's party," I texted back, "Can't. At work." No excuses, no backfill. Just reality. She sent a paragraph about how I used to be supportive. I heart-reacted and put my phone face down for the first time in months. The bed turned colder by choice, not weather. She curved away at the edge like a parenthesis. I slept well anyway. Respect is temperature. When it drops low enough, your body adapts or you leave the room. I began sleeping with the window open a crack to let the night in. The ceiling fan stopped sounding like a lament. At dinner with our mutual friends, she tried a public test I recognized from across a dozen stories men tell each other when they finally speak plainly. "We've grown apart," she announced, swirling her wine, eyes on the table like a stage cue. "I need, like, oxygen." Nobody laughed. I looked at her and said the only true thing that didn't invite a debate. "I hear you." The conversation moved on. Later, one of the wives texted me a single line, "You okay?" I typed back, "Yes." I was, in a way that surprised me. By the end of the month, the pattern didn't just repeat, it accelerated. She came home from a team happy hour with the smell of someone else's cigarette on her jacket and the kind of reckless charm people wear when they think consequences are a myth. She tossed the jacket on a chair, kicked off her shoes, and said, "Don't wait up next time." I nodded. Noted. She rolled her eyes so hard her head moved. They were meant to be arrows. They landed as punctuation. I trimmed everything to signal. Conversations, favors, expectations. When she looked for friction, she found felt. When she looked for weakness, she found weather. The house felt larger because I finally stopped taking up the space she vacated for sport. One night, she brushed past me in the hallway, perfume thick enough to sign the air, and said, almost casually, "I could leave tomorrow and not miss a beat." I nodded. "I believe you." It wasn't sarcasm. It was the last fact I needed. After that, the rest of me turned forward. The decision didn't boom. It clicked. A man can only be threatened by a door if he hasn't already located the handle. By the time the next weekend arrived, my silence had stopped being a pause and started being a stance. She kept pushing, expecting the old chase. I kept choosing distance, not in anger, but in design. That's the piece people miss when they talk about escalation. Pressure doesn't only build outward. It also compresses what matters until it becomes dense enough to act. My life was compressing into something simple: the line I drew, the respect I required, and the action that was coming. The morning I chose action, the house felt like a stage after the audience leaves. Quiet, lights still warm, the script finally irrelevant. I made coffee, set my cup on the island, and waited for her to drift in on perfume and posture. When she did, I didn't circle. You've got 48 hours to pack your things and leave my house. No heat in it, just a boundary spoken out loud. She laughed first, the quick kind that looks around for witnesses. None arrived. You're not serious. I let the silence prove me. I'm not stupid, I added, calm as a calendar reminder. I deserve better than someone who mocks me. She stood there, eyes searching for the old version of me who could be pushed back into shape. The room stayed exactly the same. She said something about lawyers, about how I'd regret this. I poured my coffee. 48 hours, I repeated, and went to work. A man can make a storm with shouting, or he can make weather with steady systems. I chose systems. On the drive, I moved our joint card to single payer, revoked authorizations, froze the retail account she used like a hobby. I changed streaming, cloud, home Wi-Fi, the garage keypad, the code on the back door she'd shared with a friend without asking. I scheduled a locksmith for Saturday afternoon, outside her 48, inside my plan. At lunch, I took a short walk in the heat that bakes clarity into concrete and called a lawyer I'd vetted months earlier when the smirks began. We talked assets, titles, timelines. The house is mine. The vehicles are separate. I documented photographs of rooms and serial numbers the way I document field conditions. Facts now, feelings later. When family and mutual friends pinged with the usual soft probes, little balloons of curiosity disguised as concern, I gave one answer, every time, without embroidery. She said I'm replaceable, so I'm preparing for that. Some try to drag me into subplots. I let the line do the work. Facts don't need extra sentences. Word traveled the way truth travels when it isn't dressed for attention. Quietly, efficiently, to the places it needed to go. Work was a relief. Schedules don't care about moods, and steel doesn't gossip. In the project meeting, I presented the revised sequence with a cleaner crane plan and watched 3 headaches dissolve like sugar. Afterward, Claire from estimating lingered. She's been in our orbit for years, sharp, steady, the kind of person who makes rooms less chaotic by existing in them. She looked at me the way people look when they're measuring if your foundation is intact. All good. A simple question, not a net. All good. I stopped filling the quiet with favors. Stopped rescuing last-minute plans she volunteered me for. When she texted a grocery list mid-afternoon, flowers, a dessert for a party she'd accepted on my behalf, I replied, can't. On site. No explanation to soften it. She sent a long paragraph about how support used to be my love language. I let the bubbles settle and didn't follow up. A man doesn't owe a defense for boundaries that keep him whole. Back home that night, I put 2 medium boxes and a roll of tape on the guest room bed and set an empty suitcase upright in our closet. I told her again, politely, what the clock said. 48 hours means 48 hours. She threw a handful of words meant to make a spark. Ungrateful, controlling, dramatic. Sparks don't do much on wet ground. I checked the time and went for a run. Neighbor logistics arrived on their own. Jake from next door caught me as I stretched by the curb. He's seen the parking patterns, heard the late returns, watched the posture changes people pretend aren't visible. Everything okay? The old me would have made a joke. The new me gave the single sentence I'd chosen. He nodded in that way men do when the facts are clean. Holler if you need a hand Saturday. A practical blessing. Inside, she started a campaign of chaos. Music too loud, drawers slammed, accusations launched from room to room like paper airplanes. I let it pass over. I cooked for one, washed one plate, answered no invitations to debate. She slept in late and woke up offended at noon. I left at dawn and came home at dusk with new shirts that fit the man I decided to be. It's not reinvention. It's removal of the parts that apologized for existing. Her mother called again and tried to guilt him about vows and patience and boys who get too proud. I stayed respectful. I'm not angry, I said. I'm clear. She tried to translate clarity into cruelty. The call ended the only way these calls end when you don't perform, with a sigh and a promise to pray. I nodded into the quiet kitchen. I'll take any prayer that asks for wisdom. Claire sent an email about a budget note that could wait until morning, which meant she didn't want me to carry the unsaid into the night. I answered with numbers and commas and ended with thanks. A minute later, you handled the meeting well. It's a strange thing when someone simply sees the work and the way you held your ground without needing a certificate for it. The message did more for my posture than any speech I could give myself. I kept the ultimatum logistical. I posted a small, typed checklist on the fridge. Keys due on the counter, garage fob returned, mail forwarding set, pickup scheduled within the window. Bullet points, not barbs. She photographed it for her group chat and laughed loud enough for the neighbors. Laughter has an echo when the joke isn't funny to the target audience. I took a picture of the same note and saved it with the date stamp. Receipts, not rage. She tried 3 more tactics before the hour hand made its second lap. First, the olive branch with conditions. Maybe a separation, maybe rules, maybe a chance to earn her respect. No, respect isn't a loyalty points program. Then seduction, the dress, the scent, the hands that remember how to rewind a man. I thanked the dress for the effort and folded laundry. Finally, escalation. Threats about ruining me with stories. I set my phone to do not disturb and slept 8 clean hours. 48 doesn't feel long until you're the one counting. For me, time lengthened, not with dread, but with precision. I backed up photos that mattered to me, boxed memorabilia, moved personal documents to a safe. I set reminders for the locksmith and a meeting with my attorney to file what needed filing the following week. I told 2 friends who have earned the right to know, and both answered the way I needed them to. You're doing the right thing. On the last morning of the window, I brewed coffee and watched the sun light the floorboards we picked together. Memory is not an argument. It's a museum. You can visit, but you don't have to live there. She emerged late, mascara thick, suitcase still flat, mouth set to daring. The old script would have called for a fight at the door. The new script is 3 words I'd already given her and the clock behind them. It's time. She looked for mercy, or mess, or anything that would prove my line was chalk, not paint. Mercy is not the same as permission. I took another sip, checked my watch, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Complete agreement between what I knew and what I was willing to do. The action wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I had given her a deadline and the dignity of meeting it. The rest would be execution, and that, at last, is work I know how to do. 48 hours isn't long when you think you're untouchable. It's forever when the clock is real. Saturday morning, the deadline humming in the background. I brewed coffee and let the house stay quiet. She slept late, then floated into the kitchen. No suitcase. No boxes. Mascara on. Phone face down. The smirk said she still believed in the old version of me. It's time, I said. She flicked her eyes to the wall clock, then to me. You can't be serious. I am. I set an empty suitcase on the bedroom rug and opened the closet. Essentials only. The protests came in layers. First, arrogance. You don't have the right. I'll call a lawyer. Then entitlement. I've put years into this house. Then that soft, poisonous tone meant to make a man doubt himself. You're overreacting, Daniel. I didn't debate. I folded what mattered to her and nothing more. Jeans, tops, shoes she actually wore, toiletries in a zip bag. I left the showpieces and the clutter. No revenge pile. Just a clean cut between what goes and what stays. She hovered in the doorway, narrating injuries for an audience that wasn't there. I zipped the suitcase, rolled it down the hall, and opened the front door. The air outside had that Austin brightness that makes concrete glare. Jake from next door pretended to check his mailbox. I carried the suitcase to the curb, placed it without slamming, and turned back to her. She stood with one hand on the doorframe. Eyes wide like a stage light had found her. I kept my voice even. Follow the suitcase. The words landed harder than a shout. She flinched. A car slowed, then kept rolling. Somewhere, a wind chime made a thin sound. She tried to pivot to guilt. You're really going to throw away our years? After everything I've done for you? Years don't disappear because a suitcase is on the curb. Respect does when you sell it for applause. I stepped aside so she could pass. She didn't move. Inside, I set her keys on the counter, fob beside them, and taped a small envelope with the spare mailbox key to her suitcase handle. The checklist I'd posted on the fridge 2 nights earlier no longer looked like a threat. It looked like a plan executed. The doorbell rang. The locksmith, right on time. Back door and garage keypad, I told him. He nodded and got to work. The click of new tumblers felt like final punctuation. She stared at the man kneeling by the jamb like he was rearranging the laws of physics. You can't change the locks on me. I gave you 48 hours and a key drop, I said. You told me I'm replaceable. I'm taking you at your word. She blinked fast, anger trying to outrun panic. She turned up the volume, tried seduction next, stepping closer, smoothing her hair, letting perfume do what it used to do. We don't have to be dramatic. We can fix this. I took one step back and gave her the only line that mattered. Respect isn't drama. It's a requirement. Her phone lit up on the island. Group chat. Bubbles stacking from the same friends who had been feeding her lines for months. She typed something fast, thumbs jabbing, then angled the screen toward me like a shield. Everyone thinks you're being cruel. I didn't take the bait. I sent my own message to the handful of people who had earned the right to context. She said I'm replaceable, so I'm preparing for that. The sentence worked the same way it had all week. Simple, undeniable, impossible to spin once you read it twice. Within minutes my phone buzzed, not with gossip, but with clean replies. Proud of you. Here if you need anything. About time you stopped carrying her weather. Her mother called while the locksmith set the garage code. I put her on speaker, kept my hands on the counter. This is heartless, she began, voice shaking. Marriage isn't supposed to be this transactional. Agreed, I said. It's supposed to be respectful. You can't throw her out on the street. I didn't. I tilted my head toward the curb. I gave her a deadline and a suitcase. I ended the call before the sermon started. I don't take lectures from people who never helped carry the load. The panic finally arrived. It always does after the last performance fails. Tears without tissue. Fast breathing. The kind of apology that's really nostalgia. Remember the trip to Port Aransas? Remember the storm and the cheap motel and how we laughed? I remembered. Memory is a museum. We walked those rooms once. We don't live there now. I walked her to the door. You told me who I was to you, I said. I believed you. Now believe me. She stared at the suitcase like it might sprout legs and walk her to a better version of this moment. She grabbed the handle and then let it go, as if the weight argued back. Where am I supposed to go? You said you had options, I said. Use one. It was the logical end of her own thesis. Claire texted. Heard about a sub who can install Monday if you need to accelerate the timeline. Also, coffee later if you want company that doesn't ask for explanations. I typed back, thanks. Monday works. Coffee after 5. Because I'm allowed to accept solid ground when someone offers it without strings. The locksmith finished, handed me the new keys, and had me sign the invoice. Professional, no curiosity. I paid, thanked him, and watched him drive away. The house felt bigger. I clicked the deadbolt once and opened it again for her. She stalled in the doorway, working through one last play. Threats. I'll tell everyone you've been cruel, controlling, cold. I shrugged. Tell the truth and the timeline. That's enough for anyone who matters. She looked over my shoulder like a camera might save her. There wasn't one. Jake lifted a hand from his yard without stepping across the property line. She saw it and straightened, pride reassembling itself, broken but not gone. She pulled the suitcase to the sidewalk. I set a folded tote on top with her chargers and a passport she always misplaced. I'm not petty. I'm finished. At the curb, she turned as if the right phrase might reverse the physics of decisions. You really don't care. I care enough, I said, to stop letting you talk to me like I'm furniture. The rideshare she finally ordered rolled up, the driver doing that careful thing where you don't look too long at a moment that isn't yours. She lifted the suitcase, stumbled, recovered, and got in. No speech or last-minute confession. The car eased away, taillights shrinking down the block we used to walk together. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the cool wood for one breath. Then I moved. Sheets into the wash. Her drawer emptied and wiped. The bathroom counters reset to the bare minimum. The checklist came off the fridge and went in the shredder. I took a picture of the entryway because I wanted to remember the line between before and after. By sundown, the house sounded different. Claire met me at a coffee shop 2 blocks over and asked me about framing costs and crane availability. We sat at a small table in the window and didn't talk about love or loss. We talked about work, about the smell of sawdust, about how a schedule feels when it runs on time. When she touched my forearm to point at a date on my phone, there was no performance in it, just presence. I walked home through the last heat of the day with a body that felt like it belonged to me again. My phone buzzed at midnight, her last swing. A paragraph about lawyers and half-and stories. I typed 7 words and put the phone face down. You said I'm replaceable. I believed you. Then I slept. Her game didn't collapse because I punished her. It collapsed because I finally refused to play. I woke up on a Sunday that felt like a clean floor after the last party guest leaves. Quiet, scuffed in places, but finally mine. The suitcase moment was already yesterday's news to me. The lock change was done. The spare key with the chipped red paint was in a drawer I no longer planned to open. The coffee tasted better than it had any right to. I made a second cup out of habit, stared at it, and poured it into a thermos instead. Old rituals don't vanish, you retire them. I put on a fresh shirt and looked at myself long enough to name what had changed. I'd stopped negotiating with disrespect. Her first message came at 9:17 a.m., a photo of the suitcase where it had landed, a tiny scrape on the corner like the world had dared to scuff her. We need to talk. There was a time I would have typed a paragraph, edited it twice, deleted it, and called instead. I wrote back 3 words. Through the lawyer. If that sounded cold, good. Boundaries should feel cold to the person who only respected warmth when it benefited them. By noon, mutual friends began the outreach rotation. Concern checking as performance art. I answered all of them with the same measured truth. She said I'm replaceable. I prepared accordingly. No embellishment. Facts are enough when you're not hiding. A few people went silent, realizing they'd been nodding along to her version without ever asking for mine. 2 others apologized for their part in enabling the theater. The afternoon slid open like a window you forgot could move. The attic surrendered a box of my college notebooks. I kept 2 pages and trashed the rest. The garage gave me shelves I could organize without negotiation. I dropped 3 bags at a donation center and felt lighter with each clunk. It's funny how long you carry objects that only exist to defend a memory. When the memory resigns, the object is just weight. Evening brought the quieter kind of revenge, detachment that doesn't need an audience. I cooked, something she always mocked as meal prep because it wasn't plated for Instagram. Steak, blistered green beans, a potato that split clean with a fork. I set 1 plate, sat in my own kitchen, and ate without bracing for commentary. When my phone vibrated again, I let it. She tried a new register, nostalgia. Remember Asheville, the cabin with the crooked porch? Of course I remembered. I also remembered who pulled the porch straight while she filmed a reel about it. I typed what was true. I remember fixing it. Then I put the phone face down and finished my dinner warm. At 8:03, the last person I expected to hear from called. Her aunt, the only one in that family who ever talked like a witness instead of a defense attorney. She's spiraling, she said without theatrics. I told her to apologize. She's not good at that. I appreciated the plain speech. Apology isn't the price of admission anymore, I said. Policy changed. The aunt laughed, not unkindly. Good. You always felt too forgiving to me. I was consistent, I said. I mistook that for virtue. Turns out it was just low standards dressed nice. I slept through the night for the first time in months. No rehearsed speeches. Morning arrived as a simple fact instead of a test. I put on running shoes I hadn't touched in weeks, ran along the river until my legs burned, and realized the heat in my chest was effort, not anger. There's a different kind of quiet in a body that isn't bracing. By late morning, she escalated. A long message that turned like a staircase. I didn't mean it. You misunderstood. You made me say it. You're cruel. You changed. All 5 stages of not taking responsibility pasted together. I read it once, and for the first time since this started, I smiled. She was right about one thing. I had changed. I no longer translated disrespect into assignments for me to complete. I replied, You said, you're replaceable. I believed you. This is me acting on belief. Then I muted the thread. She tried the financial nerves next. You can't just shut me out. I reminded her she'd been offered fairness, exactly 48 hours of it, and chose theater instead of action. She knew the house wasn't hers to squat in, and the joint accounts weren't hers to drain. She knew the rules. She'd just been living like rules were suggestions. That problem was over. Around 3, I started drafting my own replacement plan, the life she said could be swapped out like a cheap part. The list was practical. A new gym closer to the office, dinner with my brother on Thursdays, weekends back on the lake with my dad's old tackle box. Then the last line, the one I wrote and didn't erase. Call Nora. It sat there plain, unadorned, Just a sentence I finally let myself consider. I told the truth to everyone else. Time to tell it to myself. One woman in particular had noticed what I had become while I was too busy trying to save what couldn't be saved. She'd never once fed the drama or fanned the gossip. She'd just stood there, steady, when I finally stood up. I didn't call that afternoon. I finished my work, folded laundry, and shaved the beard I'd grown to hide how tired I looked. The mirror gave me back a man who didn't win or lose. He chose. I like that man better. Her last attempt came at dusk. She showed up at the gate, the suitcase beside her like an obedient dog, mascara smudged in that way people do when they've cried just enough to look like they cried. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, letting the click be the period. She started with a tremble. "We can fix this." I didn't answer. She tried the revision. I didn't mean replaceable. I was hurt. I let the silence tell her that English still meant what it meant. She glanced at the house past my shoulder. "Who's in there?" "Me," I said. "The person who lives here." It landed. She pivoted to logistics. "Where am I supposed to go?" I nodded at the suitcase. "You packed for leaving. Start with that." She hated that I wouldn't give her a villain. I refused to be cruel. Cruelty would have diluted the point. I wasn't punishing her. I was concluding the contract after breach. She reached for my sleeve, a move that used to bypass all my logic, and found air. I didn't step back dramatically. I just wasn't where I used to be. That shook her more than any speech. "You're really done?" she asked finally. I considered the honest answer. "I'm done with the version of us where I don't exist unless you're in the mood for me. If there's another version, it doesn't start here." She looked down at the suitcase, then back up at me like she might perform collapse as strategy. I didn't flinch. After a long minute, she lifted the handle. The wheels made that hollow sound on the sidewalk that always reminded me of airports and departures. Fitting. When the street swallowed her, I went back inside and locked the door, not against her, but for me. I stood in the foyer and listened. Nothing. No storm at my back. I took out my phone and typed a message drafted in my bones for weeks. "I'm free Tuesday if you still want to grab coffee." I stared at the name at the top of the thread, Nora, and hit send without dressing it in disclaimers. She replied in less than a minute. "Tuesday works." I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath underwater and finally found the surface. Before bed, I opened the Notes app and wrote one last line beneath the list that started this whole week. Respect isn't revenge. It's direction. I turned off the light and lay in the dark of my own house. Somewhere out there, she was composing a new story for herself that didn't require me as either villain or safety net. Good. We both needed the truth. Some things you can replace. Your standards shouldn't be one of them. In the morning, I'll run the river again. I'll answer questions from people who deserve answers and ignore the ones who want to show. I'll drink my coffee hot, from a chipped mug that owes me nothing. And if anyone asks what happened, I'll say it the way a man says a fact he measured twice before he cut once. She told me I was replaceable. I agreed, then replaced the version of me who believed he had to earn basic respect. It's maintenance. It's how I'll live now.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.